Okay, welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. My name is Pete Deely, and I'm sorry to report that my partner in crime, Professor Lucas Hubo, has been called to instruct this morning and just stuck with me today. But for those of you looking for submission coffee, we still have not been identified as a performance enhancing drug. So if you go to jujitsumindset.com, you can order t-shirts and coffee as well. We have just been on a tear of good fortune, and we continue today with our guest, Coach Tim Stinson. Tim, so good to see you. Thank you for taking time.
Thanks for having me.
So before we joined each other this morning, it's the end of the year, and we are talking a little bit about how do you mark progress, and a lot of people do a year in review and look at where they've come in their life in general, and then they look a year ahead and set goals. It's a lot of tradition. Tim, I know your journey as an athlete, as a jiu-jitsu athlete, had all kinds of twists and turns. And maybe you could talk a little bit about, like, when you look at yourself right now as a jiu-jitsu athlete and you're thinking about your progress, of where you've been and where you're going, how do you think about it nowadays?
So I'm definitely more reflective now than in like my youth, right? So I started jujitsu probably 2013, 2014 ish. Was hot and heavy for a long time. I was at the end of my baseball career. I got to play college baseball. I have no regrets on that. But then I didn't see myself as being like the rec league softball player, right? Like I couldn't
Right.
like go to a beer league and play softball and think that I still had it because it when you play your last game that matters, right? That actually matters. Something happens because you know that's the end of the road, right?
Yeah.
You've reached that point in your career when somebody's told you that you're not good enough to play anymore.
Right.
So then I fell in love with jujitsu. I trained for probably 2.5, 3 years pretty steadily. I had a couple fights. I fought a kickboxing fight. I fought an MMA fight,
Wow.
and I did the Chicago Open, I believe, once. And
Okay.
then so I had my MMA fight, and I 2 weeks after my fight, I got hired as a full-time firefighter-paramedic in the city of Canton.
Wow.
So my chief pulls me in the office and he's, "Hey, are you gonna keep doing that fighting shit?" And I was like, I plan to, right? Like, you don't have any sick time. So if you run out of sick time, you're just gonna get let go. So if you get injured or something bad happens, you can't come to work, you're just gonna get let go from the fire department. So he's in that scenario, like, where it's either this or it's that. And so
Yeah.
stepped away from MMA and I just focused on jujitsu for the next 2 or 3 years. And then I went to Chicago Open. I didn't perform well. I had a lot of anxiety going into it. I had a lot of analysis or paralysis by analysis, if you will.
Sure.
I was afraid to get engaged into the guard because I didn't fully trust mine. I was just afraid of engaging in the attacks because I was afraid if the scramble I would end up on my back, then I wouldn't have much to give. Right? I would just slice through.
Okay.
Um, Went through paramedic school, finished that, and then the year after I finished paramedic school, I met my wife, and I took about a 5-year hiatus.
Okay.
Started a family, I started a business, doing life things, and I missed the gym terribly, but, like, when I first started dating my wife, I it was the blue belt theory, right? I met
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
girl, that just vanished. Fast forward to, like, 3 years ago now, I had a dream on New Year's, of all things, and the timing of
Wow.
this podcast is pretty,
Yeah.
uh
It's a bullseye
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a dream, Mr. Hyman, who owns East Coast or who owned East Coast, he passed away. He, I remember I had gotten injured in prep for another Chicago Open. I tore my LCL in my knee. I was trying to hit a truck and my partner hit down at the same time. I went to roll. My
Mm.
knee just got funny and it tore my LCL. So I had to pull out. But I kept coming to the gym because it was like my home. It was my home away from home. I had my tribe, my people, all the people that support me and have who think higher of me than what I think of myself were there. And he told me that I was a martial artist.
Very
And
nice.
he said that I don't tell that to a lot of people, but you are a martial artist. I had not done martial arts for about 5 years. And I had this dream that he said, Tim, I called you a martial artist. What are we doing? And that
Right.
next day I texted Chad. I was like, hey, I'm gonna start coming back. It might be once a week or whatever, but then it was full tilt. I was in there
Okay.
so my progress as a blue belt from white to blue, I was the typical wrestler. I could
Right.
go in and I could make gym fights out of every role. I could go in and compete with guys that had rank on me because I was a fairly decent wrestler. But what that did was just it stagnated my jujitsu growth.
Yeah.
Never actually learned jujitsu until I came back from that 5-year hiatus. Like when I came back as a blue 3 years ago, I received my purple a year and a half ago, and I just got my brown belt 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I didn't fall in love with jujitsu until I came back. I
Okay.
don't know because I was older. I came back at 30. I'm 33 now. My mindset kind of changed, right? Like
Yes,
I
yes.
didn't have to be the hammer all the time.
Right.
I mean, I didn't have to view everybody as a nail. I could slow down. I could appreciate technique. I could put
Right.
myself in bad situations. And then I got really into film, like breaking down film, breaking down Marcelo, breaking down Hoffa, breaking down Tynan Dalpra, and trying to figure out how their game could fit into my game. And really, I just spent hours and hours watching and then
Yeah.
trying to implement what I've watched. And there's, as far as success and like rating yourself and your progression, I said this when I got promoted. There's a lot of false summits in jujitsu, right? Like you're climbing this mountaintop. To the mountaintop isn't getting your black belt. You
Right.
think just around this corner, it's right there, or the next promotion's right there. And something in life happens. And for hobbyists, you have most weeks I work 50, 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I have
Right. Yeah.
beautiful work. So like life happens, right? You reach that summit in jujitsu, but then something in life happens. And then I told guys in the gym, it's not a linear progression to black belt. It's a bunch of peaks and valleys. It's ebbs and
Right.
flows. You might be going through an injury and you can't play guard to this side because your shoulder hurts, or this grip's bad because your wrist is tweaked. So now you're just learning how to fight with your left hand or funneling people
Yeah.
to
Right.
your side. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
your goals from week to week change because you change and jujitsu changes and your partners give you different looks and
Yeah.
the big game's evolving while you're evolving. So I don't think that there's just not a one size fits all for setting goals. I think you should set daily goals for the gym, right? Have an intent. Because if you don't have intent with your roles, then it's just you're going to go back to the easiest rep performed, right? You're going to go to
Right.
whatever you.
Yeah.
So if you have intent, say you want to work on pressure passing from half guard. First of all, you got to get good at getting people into half guard, right? You have
Yeah.
to force position, and then you can work from there. Um,
Let me ask you a little bit of a question as it relates to being young, like 33. Obviously, you're 33. You're the oldest you've ever been, so it feels old.
it's true,
I
but
got at 53. 33 feels you're coming out of your teen years is what it feels like for at my when I think about like when I talk to people in their 80s, they look at me and they're like, "Kid, you're hardly an adult yet." So every older person looks back at the young person feels a certain way. So when you take a look at yourself 18 to 22 and you were a college baseball player, that's a hard thing to do. So in your circles of people, you're the alpha athlete probably in a lot of your and so probably had some part of your identity wrapped up in,
sure,
hey, when I do stuff, people pay attention and that's
yeah,
but as I understand it, like you also took a look at the pros and my experience as a college athlete is high school to college, very different. And division one, two, and three, each of those very different experiences. I was a division three athlete, and my favorite division three athlete story is a buddy of mine who played football. And I said, "Hey, do you think you could play division one?" And he said, "Well, let me tell you what happened." He said, "I am fast. I am blindingly fast." And so I go down to the division one school, and here I am, fastest guy I know. I'm a wide receiver. I line up and I'm sprinting down the line with my blinding speed, and the guy's covering me running backwards. So it redefined what I thought of as a fast person when like my speed
Mhm,
that I thought. So my question to you is, as you had this identity as a young person, I remember the last game I played as a college athlete, like feels a certain way. And then you brought some of that energy into jujitsu.
mhm,
When you look at that person now, what would you say to that guy? Because there may be some people out there listening that are in a similar situation. What do you think would have helped that person enjoy the experience a little more? Because yes, we want everybody to get better. Most of us that come on the podcast see jujitsu as something beyond learning to
sure.
get better at technique.
I would tell young Tim that the results don't matter,
Yeah,
not
no
nearly as
interest.
much as the journey, right?
Yeah,
Like the journey is the best part. The results will come
right.
inevitably, but they matter so little to the people that aren't you, right? Like your goals so intrinsically special to you that I'm going to say, yeah, that's important. You should do that, but nobody cares as much as you do. So
Right.
don't be afraid of the failures. Don't be afraid of
Yeah.
stepping out there. Just enjoy it. Enjoy it all. And don't put every competitor and everybody has that voice in their head that you could fail. Don't it's there. You're never going to beat that person that's in your head, but
Right.
it matters so much. It matters so much less than what you think.
Yes. I could tell you as an older competitor, when I think of the anxiety I have walking into a high school gym to compete for 5 minutes, you would think that like at the end of this competition, someone's coming out with a giant contract and a camera. It is like it is the least consequential moment in many ways if anybody around me is to watch me compete. But I carry that anxiety, which I like. That's actually part of why I do it.
Yeah.
I like a game day, even at this
Yes.
point. But I agree. So, how should a person who maybe is similar to you think about progress? Because I agree, like a detachment from achievement makes sense, but all of us need to have a sense of it's one, two, three, four. It's never one, two, three,
Right.
four. It's one, two, one, one, two, three,
Right.
two, one.
To answer, man, that's a tough question to answer because everybody has to have a purpose. You just have to figure out what your purpose is, what
Nice.
your identity is, and then not to compare yourself and your journey to other people's. Right.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is "Comparison is the thief of joy." Right. If
Yes.
you can be happy in your world, but
Yeah.
Billy from the gym over the street, who's not
Yeah.
as good as you, just got his purple belt, and you're still a two-stripe blue belt, right? That's gonna steal away from your experience, and you can't control it. It's
Yes.
outside of your control. So you just put your head down, just do the work, be happy in your situation, be happy in the lot that you've created, and just enjoy the experience. And don't compare yourself to others because it's just going to lead to madness.
Well, yeah, I think that's so wise. And I think that's one of those on the mat. That's a very concrete thing where around you is all these physical gifts you may or may not have, knowledge you may or may not have, and comparison is definitely the joy. Is there any off the mat experience that had you not had jujitsu to teach you a bit about the journey is actually the destination? Where you're like, man,
So
I can't, this thing happened, and if I hadn't had the jujitsu practice, I would have felt differently about it.
I don't, in retrospect, like all of my other athletic careers, right? Like I wrestled, I played football, I played baseball. I was never like, only thing that I was probably really super good at naturally was wrestling. Like, I am athletically good at other sports, but I worked extremely hard at baseball. I worked
Okay.
extremely hard at football, and I was always the small kid. Like, I didn't hit my growth spurt until I was probably 16 or 17. Like, I was tiny. Like, I
Okay.
wrestled 103 pounds my freshman year,
Wow.
tiny.
Yeah.
In retrospect, if I could go back and tell that kid to enjoy the journey instead of worrying
Yeah.
about everybody else, that's in my head, that's what jujitsu has given to me is the perspective of, man, just look at this body of work over this
Yeah.
extended
Nice.
period of time. And if I had that, if I could perceive my other actions as a younger person and just be able to step back and be grateful for the body of work that I put in, I feel like I would have cherished things a little bit more.
Yeah. Knowing that the 33-year-old Tim speaking to the younger Tim and has that advice. When you look at your future in this as a martial artist, as you've been crowned, right? Which is yeah, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful compliment.
One of the best compliments I ever had.
That is an extraordinary compliment. And so when you think about your journey going forward, can you feel tension in between attitudes you'd like to have and attitudes you work against? And I will tell you, Professor Lucas has said several times in the midst of the podcast and in other circumstances to me, as we talk about belts, right? Like, he's like, the black belt was the beginning for me. Like, that wasn't the end of the journey by any stretch. That was like, I had the vocabulary to go to start.
Yeah.
We were talking to Professor Hawkins here, and he talks about the currency of the belt, right? We want to earn it and then carry it around as with a certain set of value. So for you, when you think about from where you are to where you want to go in the future, your role within the gym is changing, your
Mhm.
relationship to the sport is changing. Like, how do you think about going forward?
I just want to be a steward of the game, right? I want to be a steward of jujitsu. And I want our brand at East Coast to be, I want us to be good at jujitsu, right? Because that's the ultimate goal of competing is you want to be good at it. I want to be good people. I want to be good
Yeah,
human. I want, I don't think any high level athlete, there's very few, if there are some that slip through the cracks that are bad people,
that's
right?
interesting,
Like,
right? Yeah,
because you say in your intro, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
yeah,
It doesn't happen by accident. Right? So, not my role now is shifting into I want to educate the white, the blues, everybody. If they're gonna roll and compete, I mean, the winning formula is to get good at certain things. You're not opening up your whole playbook in a competition, right? You're gonna take
right,
your
right.
A game. You're gonna
Yeah,
control factors around your A game to get to your game so that you can oppose it on your opponent. but we got to go in like we have a blue belt trace who competes all the time. And I to compete at a high level, you have to have some sort of moxie. You have to a little bit of a chip shoulder. Whether you um display that outwardly or you're just telling yourself in your head, it doesn't matter, but it has to be there,
Yeah.
right? Because you're the guy. Nobody who wins big tournaments or wins matches goes in thinking, I might not be the guy today. I believe it inwardly. And so now I think it's trying to impose that onto the people that want to compete. And because it's good for the brand. We want to be good at jujitsu. We want to hustle. We want to fight hard, but we don't want to fight dirty.
Right.
There's
Right.
checks that we hit, but hey, man, we got a guy from East Coast. He's squared away. He's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're going to shake your hand afterwards, win or lose. And we're not, and it's just business, right? You just got to be a steward of the game because there's so many people that came before us and there's going to be a ton of people that come after us. And it's important to leave a legacy of jujitsu that's a high level and also a high level person.
Yeah. One of the things that has been really fun about doing this podcast is that there's a common set of values present in many of the people that we're talking to that I don't have quite the vocabulary to describe it yet as I go along. I think about it, but I get a certain feeling. And it's that notion of we're doing jujitsu for non-jujitsu reasons in many cases,
Yeah.
right? So that notion of becoming a better person is present in many. And so when Pedro Sauer was on, we talked about many of the people who achieve high levels of jujitsu as athletes and as practitioners have had certain parts of their personalities squished out of them and that it's a refining process. For me, that's a ego issue. And I think in competition, you need to have a healthy ego that says, I'm here to present myself and to
Yeah.
assert my skills to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
However, most training, I think, takes place in a more like humble circumstance where you are receiving instruction and you're the opposite. Like today, I'm not the guy
Just
and I'm just a guy. And I have seen when I go watch black belts compete, it's the most amplitude within any tournament, right? Because once you're a black belt, you might be a black belt for 30 years, and that's not the same as the guy who just got their black belt, which is
right.
different actually than the white belts, because the white belts may come in with different like athletic backgrounds, but they have
Yes.
very
Right.
similar knowledge. I have seen competition fights between black belts where it's surprising. Oh, I didn't expect that outcome, right? So for you, when you think about the character aspect of what you're teaching, are there some hallmarks of look, we're going to be tough, we're going to be good when we go into competitive environments. But when you think about what you're sending out into the world as things you're trying to teach on the character front, what does that look like?
For me personally, number one is loyalty. I'm loyal to a fault. I always have been. And then it's honesty and integrity, right? We got to be able to be honest with each other, whether we disagree or not disagree. If we got to be honest, and then we should always do the right thing because
Right.
you're never wrong for doing the right thing. That's
That's
just
right. That's right.
it's it. Honestly, those are the three things that I probably hang my hat on the most,
Hmm.
uh, and that's what I would like to instill. And then the last one is enthusiasm, right? And
Yeah.
enthusiasm encompasses your attitude and effort.
Right.
You're enthusiastic, you're gonna have a good attitude.
Yes.
And if you're enthusiastic, you're always gonna give high effort because you love it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Enthusiasm is I think is one of the most underrated qualities
I
that you
agree. Yeah. Yeah. In terms of jujitsu's as a teaching tool for honesty, I think has some real unique qualities. Because if you are dishonest in your jujitsu practice, getting hurt and hurting, I think, is an outcome of dishonesty. Because when you
Yes.
should be tapping, but you're like, no, this position is not lost, but you're not being, then something happens. And in contrast, if someone's trying to tap and you are not loyal or honest about the circumstance, then you're a bad training partner and you can danger to the gym. I
Right.
find those to be important,
Yeah,
like,
because even
aspects.
integrity's in there because
Yeah,
we've all had that, at least I myself had it in the gym where you have something dead to rights and the person's just not tapping.
yeah.
And sometimes you just gotta be the person to let it go, right? Because it doesn't matter.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on enthusiasm, I have an irrational attachment to myself as an athlete. Like none of my joints work right, don't move. And I've had experiences. I was athletic as a kid, but as a business person, the tool I have continued to accumulate skills and successes as a business person at a variety of levels. And one thing that you said about enthusiasm reminded me of I was in a I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I was an officer of the company. I was responsible for a great deal of people and business and money and so on and so forth. And I'm with the chairman of the board of this company. And there was a big fight, and he lost the fight, then he came back, and then he was the boss again, and it was this amazing thing. And so we're talking, and he's describing his role as a leader, and he's had all these strategic ideas before I reached the pinnacle of my career. And I was going to do this and that. And then I was out of power and then into power. And then once I achieved it, it took me like 30 days to do these things. And by the end of the 30 days, I recognized that like part of the most important thing I do is supporting the people that I am leading. And what he meant by that is like loyalty and enthusiasm. Hey, I'm with you. We're going to be successful and I'm excited for the future. Those things that you're talking about within the gym played out in an
Yeah.
organization of tens of thousands of people is a very similar kind of dynamic, which I find
Any,
interesting.
any leadership role, if you're enthusiastic, chances are the people that
Yeah.
you're in lead of their charge are going to be enthusiastic, right?
Yeah.
They're going to
Sure.
reflect your behavior.
Yeah.
So if I come into class, like, cause I teach Wednesday mornings, I teach at 6:15 in the morning. If I come in, like I wake up early so that I'm alert for class, right? And I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
bed at 5:50 and walk into the gym. Like I want to be up and I want to be up by the time I get to class so I can bring in a high level of energy so
Yes.
that these guys, the morning classes, they only get to roll because they're scheduled in the mornings. They don't get the intensity of the night class. They don't get the length of the night class, but we got to make it work for those guys because they've committed to it. So
Right.
I want to get up. I want to be early. I don't want to look like I'm tired because I
Right.
want to
Right.
be enthusiastic because if I'm working tired, everybody else is going to be tired.
For
Right?
sure.
Everybody else is going to be falling asleep. And I'm like, I can't be that guy. Like we have to be enthusiastic. But that story reminds me, your boss, Simon Sinek, had said that people in charge, they're not in charge of other people. They're in lead of other people's charge.
Yeah. That's
And
nice.
and that made like that quote, it's so good because he said, when somebody does well, they get the credit.
Right.
If they don't live up to the quotas, you take the blame.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like, that's what leaders do. They don't point fingers.
Right.
They celebrate people when they need celebrated. And
Yes.
then they take the heat when somebody doesn't live up to the standards. And then you go back and coach. That's your job.
Yeah. That's so well said. And I think marrying honesty and enthusiasm in terms of values, having been in a lot of business contexts where the enthusiasm was not honest, comes across very hollow and manipulative, right?
Mhm.
Someone comes
Yeah.
in to raw you because they want a particular result. Feels very different than the person who's coming in sincerely interested in the other person. So one of the things that I'm so lucky about with Professor Lucas in our gym is that particularly with the kids, but with all of us, but at this point in my life, I'm always interested in the dynamic between how are children being uh, brought into teenage or adult life? How are they being prepared for life going forward? And his enthusiasm for them to be better is honest, and and you can feel it that like when he's talking to them and coaching them, it's very sincere. And I find that to be something that plays out in so many other contexts. So when
Yeah.
somebody is not honestly for you, then it feels like manipulation. And when they're
Yeah.
honestly for you, it's so motivating because it
Yeah.
fills somebody's cup that otherwise is, I don't know if I can do
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that microcosm of the role of the is like a chance to be tested, to be safe, and have someone go, I want you to do the best, but I still want to beat you. And that
Yeah.
out of that comes like some real magic, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't
Yeah.
do it on your own. Yeah.
No. And I tell the guys at the gym all the time, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
together. We
Yeah.
can't
That's well.
we can't do any of this stuff without each other. So we're just constantly, you're just leveling up each other as you go. And it's just one of the greatest things. It's just good. My wife wants to start it. I took her to an open mat and she got to roll a couple of times. And she's now I don't understand why you like it so much. If we get the kids to be able to listen, we can start going to
So speaking of that, when you think about your years of observing and coaching and being part of a community, do you have a favorite story of like your observation of how jujitsu affected somebody in a particular way, like very where that would matter to them, very extreme way?
So I think more generalized. than most. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot.
Mhm.
And what like majority of men are missing in their lives is this sense of tribalism, right?
Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
sense of like outside of work, outside of family, like a group of
right.
friends, a group of like-minded people to get together. What I see in jujitsu is that happens most of the time across the board, right? There's a couple buy-in months, right? 6 to 8, maybe to a year. Like
Right.
you got to make sure that this guy's in and he wants to be a part of it because you've seen so many people leave.
Yeah.
Well, that sense of tribalism that especially men get that are
Mhm.
in their careers that have a family, but just to be able to come to the gym, even if it's 1 time a week, they're a part of this group. They're
Right.
a part of like-minded people, politics aside, everything aside, just a bunch of guys who come in and wrestle each other.
Yeah.
And I think like that positives, one of the guys that is at our gym, he's a blue belt now. My favorite story about him is he was apprehensive about doing jujitsu. Now I hadn't come back to the gym yet, so I wasn't there when this happened. But Chad tells me the story. And one of our brown belts now, we got promoted the same day, Logan. He's a younger gentleman. I think he's 23 or 24. He's been in the kids program since he was 13. Anyway, at the time, he was working at Chuck E. Cheese. He was the
Okay.
Chuck E. He was Chucky. So he was
Okay.
the guy.
Okay.
The
He had
Chuck
the
E.
helmet
Cheese
on.
guy.
Yeah. Mhm.
So Big J comes in and he's apprehensive about you. So he's, I don't know if I'm going to sign up because he was a kickboxing guy. And Chad's like, I think you'll like it. So
Right.
he sends Logan to grapple. Logan's a blue belt at the time. He's Chuck E. Cheese, right? He's the mouse. So Logan just puts it on him. And Jay's a big guy. Goes probably, he's a big guy. So afterwards, Logan tunes him up and Chad's like, "What do you think?" He's, "Man, that was rough." He goes, "Yeah, that's Chuck E. Cheese." And Jay's like, "Telling him that's the dude that wears the mouse mascot at Chuck E. Cheese." And Jay has never left. He's been here ever since. It's a sense of belonging too, man. Like when you
Yes.
just get to the gym, it's like your second family. And there's no, and because of how honest jujitsu is and because of how close it is, like there's no, you just feel like you can be yourself when you walk through the door.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
have any expectations. It's just people are excited to see you because they're excited to see you. There's
Yeah.
not, "Hey, what you got for me today? I need this done." It's just, it's genuine happiness to be there
Yeah.
amongst like-minded people.
Yeah. The notion of the uniform, like when I was a kid, I think putting on a uniform of any sort, I thought of it as identity for me.
Yeah.
Hey, I wear the
Mhm.
uniform, and that meant something to me personally. And now, as I enter this phase of my life, I see the uniform more about stripping away than adding to. And what I mean by that is, so when I go with my training partners, often as we step off the mat, we usually are talking about what we just did. But on occasion, especially over time, get to know people in their lives. And then it turns out like I'm rolling with the chief medical officer of this giant company, and I'm rolling with somebody who's like in charge of this and that, or they're the fire department chief. Their lives are full of extraordinary accomplishment and this and that. But once we step on, it's not that stuff leaves those people. They carry it with them, obviously. But there's no leveling of, oh,
Right.
and I find
Yeah.
that to be a good reminder that we're all people working our way through our lives, and we're gonna
Yeah.
put all that behind it, and we just all doing this together. So for me, part of that tribalism is a way, just people here to improve, and for this time period, it's all that's important. So we leave
For
everything offside the mat, and here
Yeah,
we are.
it's all you think about for
Yeah,
whatever hour long. For if it's 90 minutes, if it's 60, it's
yeah,
all you think for
right.
that. It's a form of meditation, really, to some people.
I That's exactly how I feel about it, and that
Yeah.
it's so hard in our lives to have something that keeps us in the moment, but being choked,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
all of a sudden, that's what you're thinking about when you're, like, fighting for breath.
yeah, right.
Your
It's like,
attention is
if I just slip my head out, I'll be okay.
and that's all you're worried about, that moment. Yeah, that versus and the fact that it's happening between people. I spent maybe 10 years in the CrossFit community, and in a similar way, I competed, never expecting to be anything. It was always important to me. And I had lots of moments in which I wondered if it was gonna kill me, that particular workout. But that was a different experience than the attention that is forced upon a person in a jujitsu, training.
So I Olympic lifted with the team for a little while, but the just jujitsu grappling is so intimate, right? And I know that's
Yeah,
like a romantic word for dudes wrestling each other, but it is.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Um, because you're just it's just an intimate setting, right? Like you're grabbing another, you're just so close proximity wise. You have to get super comfortable with people
Yep.
because in the gym, you're not really fighting, right? In a fight, it's a fight, it's
Right, right.
different. But when you're training, like you just got to be comfortable with the people that are surrounding you. So
Yeah,
I think intimacy of it is what sets it apart from even football or baseball. Like wrestling, I would say is it's a really
yeah,
close, but even in wrestling on your feet, there's a lot of times where you're not mounted, you're not being triangle choked, right? There's like
yeah, yeah.
death still isn't an option.
That's right.
So it's different. It's way different. And I encourage everybody to try it. One of my buddies just started a couple weeks ago. His older brother's my best friend. I've known this kid since we were 5 and 6 years old. And he just started. I told him, welcome to the club. I love it. I'm like, I've been telling him for like literally 7 years, like, you got to come try it. Like, you'll like it.
Yeah,
You, he didn't wrestle. He played basketball. I was like, so your first 2 years are going to be really rough.
right,
But if you can get through your first 2 years, dude, like it's worth it. I promise
right,
you it's worth
right. Yeah,
it. You have to eat the crow for the first couple of years because it's just
sure.
how it is. That's everybody that's got a color belt that's gone up. They've done this 2 years, and it's the hardest thing you ever do, but it'll be worth it. It'll be
Yeah,
so
yeah.
worth it.
Yeah, for me, it's language acquisition is the metaphor for me. Now, I'm still sadly, even though I'm over 3 years now, I'm on my ABCs still. I'm hardly
Yeah,
making words, and so I'm a slow learner. And it's interesting about, like, the notion of proximity between people because, my wife's a naturopathic physician. Health and wellness is something that, like, participated in a variety of ways throughout my lifetime. And when you're so close to a person, thing they're on the biological level, you are sharing things there that can be a little disconcerting if you take a
yeah,
second to
right.
think about it. But during the height of the COVID years, we could train. There was a period of time where we weren't allowed to train, but through most of, I think, the height of that, we trained. And one thing I will tell you is that, generally speaking, we were all pretty healthy people in general, but there was, I don't want to say zero cases, but almost no cases. And I almost feel like there was a shared, like, inoculation is too strong of a word, but I think that
Sure.
something was going on that was protective in that I
Yeah.
think was valuable. Psychological, physical, your
Mhm.
microbiome, everything is like being served and taken away.
Yeah.
Listen, we're heading into 2024, and as we head to the end of the podcast, when you got, let's say you're talking to the blue belt, we like to avoid the blue belt curse if we can. And that person's struggling. How do I think about goal setting for next year beyond releasing of your attachment to external achievements? How might you suggest that person think about goals?
I would so yearly goals are important, right? Yearly goals are important, but if we don't set monthly, weekly, and daily goals, we're not
Yes.
going to achieve our yearly goal. So
Yeah.
if the goal at the end of the year is to go to say Worlds,
Uh-huh.
okay, then we can backlog all of our goals into these minute goals for a day to day,
Mhm.
right? So if I'm that blue belt and because the vastness of jujitsu is it's incredibly vast that you can never learn all of it.
Right.
But what we can do is try to make each session have small goals for each session so that they still have a sense of fulfillment from week to week. Then that week to week leads to month, and then that month to month leads to a good year. And even if we do everything right, even if we check all the boxes, we hit our daily goal. Say our daily goal for Monday is in a roll I don't want to get passed by a black belt, like Pete, or if I want to get to a certain position, so I want to work on my butterfly guard. So I got to
Right.
force people in butterfly guard to work on either hook sweeps or arm crushes or whatever. We can hit those parameters. And then now we have to build a system throughout the couple months, right? We've implemented the day to day. Now, say the next week, we'll say, all right, our partner's going to start from standing or we're going to pull guard. Then we can start working on small
Right.
goals there. But let's not dilute it by saying, okay, this year I have to do this. Let's
Yes.
just worry
Yes. Yes.
about today. Let's
Right.
just worry about today. What are we going to do today to get better? My dad for years has always said, just be 1% better every day.
Yeah. Right. Right.
1% better.
Yeah.
I'd rather make mediocre gains every day than extravagant gains from time to time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, just be we could be average every day and get 1% better, and that
Yeah.
over the course of a year will
Nice.
pay di
Yes. Yeah, habit stacking, right? And then I think, how you do something is how you do anything is something
yeah,
that I feel It is a terrifying mantra that I keep with me because when I'm being less than attentive to what's in front of me, it
Right.
bothers me because I know like
Yeah.
I'm being lazy in this particular thing. And that means that laziness has crept into that, or I'm not being as careful in this circumstance as I should. And there are no extravagant gains at any given time. You can only notice it, but those extravagant gains are built one step at a time, right?
Yeah. And they're
Yeah.
fleeting too,
And yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're fleeting. And it depends on what the blue belt's goal is. If his goal is to
right,
get promoted, then he's got to talk to his coach and see what areas he needs to work on, and then he can work on those areas from the day to day, like I had said. If it's to win worlds, now you're that's a whole conglomerate of things, right?
yeah,
Everything has
sure,
to fall in place, and even if you do everything right the whole year, you
right.
could still not win worlds. And like
Yes, yes,
there's a really good chance that you're still not going to win worlds.
right,
But like you got to focus on your nutrition, your recovery, your strength training, your conditioning, and all these things got to go hand in hand because the ultimate goal of those things is not to take away from jujitsu. It's to make your jujitsu better, which
right.
is what I wish I'd have learned a little bit earlier in my career. Because if I lifted, I was lifting way too much. If I conditioned, I was taking away from the training sessions that should have been the meat, and I was
Yeah,
eating
yeah,
potatoes than I was meat. Right.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, One thing I wish I'd have learned a little bit earlier is to titrate the supplement work
yeah,
so
yeah,
that the work that's important, the meat of the meal, would
right.
got the most attention. Something I failed to do for a long time.
Yeah, Hobson Moore, we got a chance to talk to Professor Hobson, and he was like talking about people that come into the gyms in which he's a part of, and they're like, "I need to get in shape before I do jujitsu," even for people in shape. You wanna get to be properly in shape for jujitsu, you have to do jujitsu. And I find that, like, an interesting particularly for athletes that are in mature phases of their, like, parents, professionals, and whatnot, you run into a time management issue of how much
Yes,
where can so I always prioritize my time on the mats because it's the most
I
fun part of it. However,
absolutely.
I need to be 50% more stronger to get half as strong as all these incredible people around me. Listen, Tim, thank you, Coach Tim, for spending time with us, man. I was so
Thank you. I
grateful
appreciate
that
it having
yeah, well, and
this
maybe
was
back another time, man.
oh, I'd love
Appreciate it.
to. Anytime you want to talk about jujitsu, I'm in.
Oh, right on. Okay.